Welcome, welcome, welcome back, beautiful people. It's 8 o'clock on the dot. I'm on time. And if you're here, you're on time. Kudos to you. Kudos to us. At any rate, I'm excited for tonight's live. I want to welcome you back to my channel. I am Brittany, your manifesting mentor. I'm not a coach, I'm not a guru, but I'm someone who's walking this path right alongside you. And I help people align with the life that they truly desire by demonstrating how to embody the teachings of spiritual and scientific thought leaders like Dr. Joe Dispenza, Neville Goddard, and others. These are the people that I tend to give a lot of credit to helping me awaken along my path. And I'm so excited about it that I just have to share what I've learned. We're continuing our Becoming Supernatural series tonight by diving into parts 4 and 5 of chapter 7, which is titled Heart Intelligence. If this is your first time joining, I've created a full playlist on my YouTube channel. It's the only playlist that's public and available. It's of all of my teachings, all of my readings, all of my reflections, and all of the live sessions from every Tuesday and Friday that I've been going live for the past 7 weeks because we're on chapter 7. Actually, it's been 8 weeks because there was an introduction in a chapter 1. So, boom. At any rate, you can find this playlist linked on my channel, also in my TikTok bio of the description or in the description below. So I'm just going to get right into tonight's teachings because it's Friday. I don't know if you got plans. You don't know if I got plans. But we're going to keep this going because it ain't none of your business. Anyways, we're going to jump right into part 4, and it's titled The Heart Brain. And in this part 4, Dr. Joe not only talks about the heart brain, but he talks about living heart centered. And so, some of the key points that I want to review is Dr. Joe lets us know that the heart is not just an organ, it's not just something that pumps blood throughout our extremities, it's not just a blood pump. It's an intelligence center with a brain of its own. And he says that it can send powerful signals to the rest of the body. As a matter of fact, it does. He says that our heart brain is what he calls it, heart hyphen brain, actually gets information before our minds get information, before the physical brain gets information. So when you're feeling an emotion, for example, the very first organ to get that indication of what emotion you're feeling is the heart. And from there, it sends signals through the other extremities, and the brain gets the message. This is why, if you're ever in danger, your heart starts racing first, and then your brain tries to connect what's happening. So, Dr. Joe encourages us to learn how to live heart centered. And what does that mean? He says that living heart centered means consistently aligning your thoughts, emotions, and actions with elevated states like gratitude, love, and compassion. We keep coming back to this lesson on elevated emotions, and it's not just because it's something you just want to do because we've been taught by law of attraction and law of assumption to think positive, but there's literal physical ramifications from for living in elevated emotions. And it's not just that you get to feel good, is that you get your body to create healthier hormones because emotions are chemical reactions in the body. And when we learn how to live heart centered, majority of the time, rather than in states of fight or flight because we're stressed chronically, which is something that we've all have been conditioned to in the Western world. But when you learn how to live in those elevated states of love, gratitude, compassion, safety, relief, you're conditioning your body to feel safe, number one, in your body, regardless of what's happening external, regardless of any physical conditions you might have. You're conditioning your nervous system to stay in homeostasis, not just stay in homeostasis, but to return to homeostasis because stress is a normal part of life. It's just not normal to live chronically in stress. And then he says, when you start to learn how to live heart centered, this balance creates internal harmony, coherence. It impacts your hormones. It impacts your immune system. It also, by the way, impacts your length of life because he says that people who meditate regularly actually lengthen their telomeres, and your telomeres are the parts of your genes that basically indicate how long you would actually live if you lived a healthy life. um, but also our ability to manifest. Because when we are in heart coherence, we actually are like a super magnet. We're a super magnet to everything we actually desire because there's no resistance, which is a big deal. If you've been learning about law of attraction for a very long time, like I have, you understand that resistance is always the thing that gets in the way. It's the barrier between what you desire and whether or not your body has caught up to accept that what you desire is actually a possibility. And so, as I've been deepening my own practice this week, I've noticed that tuning into my heart center has helped me move from needing external proof to feeling internally grounded. I'm able to literally, as Dr. Joe says, live that future now. I'm asking myself, that future version of me, with all the things that I'm calling in, my desires, how can I feel more like her? And what would she do? How would she feel? For me, I focus less on the tangibles like task, and I focus more on how I feel in my body, how I think she would feel. And if you've been around for a while, you know that I've shared that for a long time I lived very anxiously. I had some days what I felt like was crippling anxiety. I never was diagnosed with it, but I know it runs in the family, right? Like we're reading about this in genetics and things that run in the family. But epigenetics shows and proves that things that so-called run in the family are caused by our environment and how we basically learn how to cope. And so you're learning things from your environment, your parents, your grandparents, by osmosis, basically. You're learning how to survive. And so I lived anxiously. And this week practicing heart-centeredness is helping me to really tune into the version of me who doesn't have that anxiousness. She feels very calm in her body. She's very trusting. She's very grounded. And to be honest, it feels like a whole nother lifetime ago because I've been practicing this work more so um, since I've been reading the book again. But I would say that doing it this time around, being more intentional this time around, I'm really focused on releasing that part of anxiousness, and I just don't find myself operating that way anymore. And it's not to say I never feel anxiousness. It's just that I'm able to walk it back so much faster. And so my reactionary period with anxiousness or anxious feelings, anxious thoughts, it's become less and less and less and less and less. And eventually I know it will be no more. So there were moments where I caught myself mentally checking to see if my desires were coming yet. I shared that on Tuesday. But when I drop into my heart and I feel gratitude, I feel freedom, I feel relief as if it's already done, I shift and I feel calm. I feel like this is how life is supposed to be. I'm not supposed to be stressed all the time. I'm not supposed to be anxious. I'm not supposed to be looking around the corner for what's next. I'm just supposed to be in the generous present moment. Because as we learned in this chapter, the generous present moment is the only moment where infinite possibilities exist. But I can't tune into infinite possibilities if I'm focused on my past, replaying stories from the past, or if I'm fearful of my future, wondering where it's at. I can only tune into the infinite potentials that exist for me when I'm present. And so, doing this heart centered meditation, which we learned, and we're going to talk about in part 5. But when I drop into my heart and feel these emotions, I do shift. And I also feel closer to that version of me who knows that what I desire is not just possible, but it's inevitable. And if you're doing this work and you understand these principles that we're working with, even when it comes to law of assumption as taught by Neville Goddard, if you persist, although something might be false, if persisted in, eventually it will harden into fact. Why? Because whatever you repeat will become a belief. That is how we're wired. And this is why Abraham and Esther Hicks teaches that a belief is just a thought that you keep thinking over and over again until you believe it. And so this is what we're doing as we're continuing to practice becoming supernatural. And I could talk you guys this ear off. If you're joining me, please feel free to chat in the comments and let me know where you're joining from. I'm going to keep going because we did get a few questions. Um, the first person asked, how do I know if I'm actually living heart centered? I would say just pay attention to how you feel. It's exactly what I do throughout my day, especially this week. As I mentioned, I had some moments where anxiousness was right around the corner, but one of the things I'm doing intentionally is I scan my body. I ask myself, how am I feeling in this moment? And I, scan for what I'm thinking about that could be possibly contributing to how I'm feeling. So I would say if you pay attention to how you feel throughout the day and ask yourself, am I reactive or am I responsive? Because you'll know the difference. Are you grounded or are you anxious? When you live from your heart, your nervous system is more regulated. You're more calm. You think before you act or respond. Or, yeah, you think before you act or react, and you end up responding. And then you're also less easily thrown off course, is what I would say. Any external like triggers that you might have, people that you're used to arguing with, it just doesn't happen as easily because as Dr. Joe says, once you start practicing this work, you're never going to let those unconscious thoughts go slip by your awareness without being checked. So practicing this just makes you a lot more aware, and you're not letting those sneaky little thoughts or those emotional reactions go by without you knowing how to check them. Welcome, all natural Virgo 44 says, telling my children about my teenage years lets me know I'm stuck in the past, but I'm working on it. Hey, it's all good. We are the sum of our stories, and it's okay to tell stories from the past. You just don't want to tell the ones that keep you stuck. Like if it's a traumatic event or something like that that no longer serves you, Dr. Joe Dispenza says you'll know when you've grown from something when you can tell the story without the emotional charge. So from that space, it becomes wisdom. So if you're telling a story and you're not mad about it no more, you learned a lesson. It's okay to tell the story. Nothing wrong with that. And you're actually not as stuck as you might think you are. But welcome. Thanks for joining me tonight. And thanks for sharing in the comment. Someone said, what's the biggest obstacle? Oh, did I finish that? I did. Hopefully I answered that last question because I'm just moving on to the next. What's the biggest obstacle to living from the heart? Change is the biggest obstacle. I would say change is the biggest obstacle, but change because we're so conditioned to live in survival. And if you've been doing this work, you know it's not easy. This is why I started reading the book with community, because so many people, I know these are complex ideas, and people think they have to go to a Dr. Joe Dispenza workshop to really get results, and you don't. You just have to be consistent and show up for yourself. So I would say survival emotions like fear, frustration, unworthiness, those are the things we practice for a long time. And they pull us out of our present moment and into the mind's limitations, because the mind only knows what it's experienced in the what? In the past. It has no clue what's available to it in the future. So when you're feeling those survival emotions, just know that that's when you're in the past. And that's why heart center practices like breath work, like meditation, like elevated emotions, they're so key to rewiring your emotional baseline of the body. And that's basically why we want to learn how to recondition the body to a new mind. And I hope that helps as well. Um, y'all, this week was I actually really appreciate this chapter because it's one of those chapters that I skimmed over the first two times reading it, apparently, because this time around I'm actually spending more time with it, and I find myself doing more meditations that are focused on heart-centered coherence. And I did not do that before. I didn't used to do that. And I'm so glad I'm doing it because, again, the heart is the magnet. And I prefer to live this way. I prefer to not always be in a state of fight or flight, or be looking for the next trigger around the corner, or anticipating something that I know is not going to feel good to experience. So definitely double down on this chapter, like I'm doing right now, because it does make a difference in how you show up in your day to day. I'm going to move on to part 5, which is where Dr. Joe shares examples from his workshops. And here he shares real life transformations of people who've achieved coherence and healing through heart brain alignment. And some of these stories emphasize that anyone can create change when the body and the emotional state of their future, change when they embody the emotional state of their future before it arrives. And so many people think that, you have to see evidence. But I think the more you practice these heart centered emotions, you stop caring about the proof. And Dr. Joe basically showed in this chapter how someone was able to heal eczema. They were able to have all sorts of changes in their brains, um, all because they started just embodying these emotions while they were at the workshops. And the thing that Dr. Joe was able to do was measure this. I think it was earlier in the chapter we talked about heart rate variability, and he was able to measure the changes in these people's, not just their physiology and the things that they came in with in terms of illness or pain, but he was able to measure their brain waves and measure the changes in their actual brains. And this process is less about doing and it's more about being. So the more you practice these heart brain coherence, just living in elevated emotions and being aware of your heart center. Because again, I feel like we move so fast throughout our day, we rarely pay attention to the heart, unless, of course, we have a heart condition. And I think it doesn't need to be that way. I think Dr. Joe was kind of emphasizing how a lot of heart conditions are born out of people being disconnected from their emotional state, not really being aware of when they're in fight or flight, and sometimes he says it's equivalent to stepping on the gas pedal and the brake at the same time. So if you can imagine what that's like in a car, then imagine what you're doing to your heart when you are living in these survival emotions, the emotions of stress, and not realizing it. And it becomes a chronic way of existing. So we want to learn about people who are doing the miraculous, who are changing not only their physical bodies, the issues that they're having in their bodies, but they're changing their emotional patterns, which is why they're able to change their physical conditions and heal. And so reading this reminded me of the breakthrough that I had just from consistently practicing tuning into my heart. During one of my meditations in the morning, I think I mentioned this on Tuesday as well, that I tapped into a deep sense of appreciation, not for anything external, because nothing outside was happening. It wasn't like I got some good news or anything. I just have been learning to tune into the emotions of feeling like it's already done. And what happened was I felt super grateful for being alive, for just being here, right? Because this is an opportunity. I just did a video on that. How learning about this work is our ancestors' wildest dreams, because Dr. Joe is marrying science with spirituality. And I don't think a lot of people understand how important that is. Before, for a long period of time, science and spirituality were completely separate. As a matter of fact, they were judging each other like crazy. People in the religious realm thought that scientists were, trying to pretend to be God. And people in the science world thought that the religious people were kooks and believing in something they can't see, which is weird, right? That's how they painted each other. But to have a person like Joe show up, and he's giving credence to he's giving credibility to a lot of what some people would deem as woo woo. Basically, for me, I've been learning about a lot of these teachings for a long time, and people like Neville Goddard is starting to make sense from a scientific standpoint to me. And I'm like, I wish Neville knew some of this science, because maybe that would have taken his teachings to an even deeper level than what he was able to go, because a lot of people thought that he was crazy. And now you got a person like Dr. Joe bringing the science behind everything that Neville been teaching y'all to do. That's something that he learned from an Ethiopian rabbi. And I think it's so dope. And even like Bible stories from Jesus healing people. Like Dr. Joe at his workshops, they have coherence healings. People are able to heal remotely from doing these healing circles. And it's literally understanding the energetics, understanding what it means to be aligned, having your energy centers aligned and blessed and in coherence, understanding the power of your heart. And when multiple hearts are in alignment and they're in the same vicinity and their intentions are the same, you're adding power energetically to whatever your intention is. And this is how people are able to heal even at the workshops through coherence healings. And there is a lot of science around coherence healings now. Not just Dr. Joe's work, but I had a couple books, and I might actually link them in my playlist for you guys to learn about. But heart coherence is a real thing, and people are learning more about it from a scientific standpoint. And we're understanding that we can literally shift the energy on the planet when we do this work for ourselves. But it's more than just for ourselves, because everything in our lives, everyone in our lives, and this planet actually benefits from us raising our frequency. But I went on a whole tangent. At any rate, I was sharing that one of my meditations, I just felt grateful for being alive. And that one shift made my entire day feel completely light. And later day, I had a moment where I was talking with a friend in a local coffee shop. And all of a sudden, I started having these synchronicities because three songs played on the radio at the coffee shop, and they all had something to do with what I was intending for in my meditations. And these are what we call synchronistic moments. They're not coincidences, they are alignment, essentially. And you're only able to catch them when you're paying attention and you're aware of where your thoughts have been throughout the day and what you're thinking about in the moment. And so I had moments like that. And the timing, the lyrics, it was like super uncanny. But that's what happens when you broadcast the right frequency. The universe starts tuning into and basically giving you feedback. That's what synchronicities are. So, someone asked, why are the workshop stories so important? Well, for the reason that I heard Dr. Joe say it, he said that it's like the 4 minute mile. You know, we don't think something is possible as humans until we witness someone else do it for whatever reason. And once we see one person do it, then for many of us, that's enough to say, hey, anything is possible, right? So part of why he thinks it's so important to share these stories at workshops is because when he first started getting results with some of his clients, if you guys know, he's a chiropractor by trade, but he first started teaching people how to do healings and how to really do the meditations to transform their lives through his private practice. And so when he started hosting workshops and people started sharing that they were getting results, he was like, there's something to this, and I need more people to hear about this. Oh, and also I need to be gathering research so that people know that this isn't just a one off or something that happens here and there. It happens when people lock in with the work and they do the work and they get the results. So he thinks it's really important for that. I also think it's important for that reason, because part of why I even read the book for a third time, a second time, and why I bought two of his courses and I continue to do this work for the past 5 years is because it serves as evidence. I watch his stories of transformation on his channel. I tune into the people that are telling these stories and they look no different than me. These are everyday people. There's nothing, and I'm not, no knock against anybody who shared a story. I think they are phenomenal people. And what Dr. Joe says, he calls us all geniuses, but they're not more different than me, meaning the universe doesn't favor them more, right? It's just that they decided to do something different, to train their bodies to show up differently. And because they had the perseverance, the discipline, and the consistency to stick with it, even when it got hard, because for most people, it gets hard, um, they were able to have breakthroughs. And I know myself, I know when I put my mind to something, I'm going to get it, period. I get what I want. I get what I want. I've yet to be denied in this lifetime. And so I don't think that is off limits for me. So when people see these examples, these stories of transformation, I believe that they feel similar to how I feel. If it's possible for one, it's possible for anyone, literally. And so as you do the work, you start getting your own synchronicities and you start getting your own transformations and you start to see there's something to this. And like Dr. Joe says, people, they keep going because they don't want the magic to stop. They don't want to stop feeling like what it feels like when your desire is fulfilled. They don't want to stop living heart centered. They don't want to stop experiencing elevated emotion because we know how dense this life can get. We know how heavy life can be. We know how traumatic living life can be, just being in your own body and in your own life in different ways and how you process life can be really hard. Let's just be for real. And so when you start doing this work and you start experiencing more peace than chaos, even though chaos is happening all around us in different ways, you don't want to lose that. You don't want to miss that. When you see what's possible for other people, especially with those real challenges, like people who were deaf in one ear, blind, or people who had cancer, terminal illness, things that their doctors told them they were going to die from. And Dr. Joe calls it the curse, right? Like when you get a prognosis or diagnosis where the medical team is not very optimistic because they have enough data to back it up. But what Dr. Joe is teaching you is that when you learn to be a better steward of your own mind, your own nervous system, and you understand how powerful you really are, what your body can actually do, and you manage it well, you don't have to succumb to stats and statistics, basically. And you can become supernatural. We were born for this. This is our makeup. This is what the divine equipped us with in these vessels. We just didn't know how to use them. It's like having a car and not knowing that it's a car that you can drive. Like you just thinking it's a big lunk of metal and you don't know what a car can really do, how it can get you from A to B if you get the oil changed, if you change the tires, rotate the tires, learn how to maintain it. And so I think that that's why it's so important to learn about those stories from the workshops, but also people who do the miraculous. They have healings at home. I literally just found another creator on YouTube who shared about the importance of creating experiences like Dr. Joe's workshops at home. And it gave me an idea, which I probably have done this tons of times. But whenever I have vacation time from my 9 to 5, I treat it as if I'm on a retreat. And I do the meditations daily, sometimes multiple times a day. And I'll watch the videos or lectures from Dr. Joe's online workshops because they basically are recordings from his live workshops. So it's no different, right? And the only difference is there's not a whole bunch of other people around me. Well, one other person in my life is actually practicing. So if I invite that person into my experience, my schedule for the day, they're gladly going to participate because they love this work as well. Um, but it's possible to change. You can do the miraculous. You don't have to go to a workshop. You can have experiences. You can have healings. You can have manifestations right at home. The second person says, "What if I'm doing the meditations and still don't feel anything changing?" That is that's normal. That's why we practice daily because every day is not going to be the same. You know, this is why I feel like it's so important to learn about this chapter specifically because when you learn how to live by elevated emotions, you're not looking in your 3D reality for um, proof because essentially you are the proof. The fact that you can show up different, the fact that you can allow yourself to feel a different emotion than what you're used to. Because if we're honest, most of us exist in a set of emotions that we practice every single day. And believe it or not, for a lot of us, frustration is a part of that daily routine. It's a part of that daily routine. And when you learn how to condition your body to feel something other than that emotion of frustration, you're giving yourself a taste of possibility. And it's not going to be like that every single day, or at least all day, every day. Like there's something new around the corner all the time, but it's an opportunity for you to practice being who you want to be. Who do you say you are, as Neville Goddard says? because whoever you say you are, that's what life has to be for you. I am the person who gets to live in abundance, who gets to live in a world of peace. And I'm not saying that everything in my life is always going to be peaceful, but I'm saying that I have the ability to decide how I want to feel on any topic. And I'm going to always choose peace over anything. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm never going to react because sometimes I might choose violence, but I will return back to peace. How y'all like that? I might choose violence sometimes, but I know how to return back to homeostasis. I like that. But yeah, so not feeling anything is extremely normal, especially if you're new to the work. It takes time. You didn't get the way that you are. You didn't start believing what you believed overnight. It took repetition, lots of reaffirming, lots of looking for evidence in your environment to say, oh, this must be true. I thought that thought. So because I see that, it must be true. So imagine shifting an entire new paradigm to say, okay, I used to think this about that, but now there might be another potential for me to, like a potential way for me to think about this. And that's basically what you're doing. That takes time and it happens in layers. So you're reconditioning your nervous system. And if you keep showing up with intention and keep feeling the elevated emotion before it arrives, that's the signal that brings the reality to you. So constantly remind yourself, and like I said, watch the stories of transformation or come back to this playlist and rewatch the chapters because it'll remind you of why you're showing up this way every single day to continue to recondition your body to a new mind. Because your world that you live in right now is evidence of everything that you used to believe. Your world right now is evidence of what Neville calls the old man. And for a while, even when you start this work, you're going to continue to see evidence of the old man. But you have to be aware enough to know that what you're seeing in front of you is not who you really are. It's evidence of the old man, past practiced beliefs, reactions, emotional states. So as you continue to choose who you want to be, practice the elevated emotions, you'll start to see the synchronicities of those changes happening. They might be subtle, they might be sporadic, but they're there. And what you need to start doing is gathering evidence for that. Every single time you see synchronicities, write it down. Talk to somebody about it, journal about it, because that's going to be your evidence for the possibility of change. Every time you watch a story of transformation from Dr. Joe's his different workshops, that is going to be another piece of evidence that change is happening. Every time you catch yourself in the middle of a reaction, in the middle of a trigger, about to curse somebody out, but you say, you know what, I'm gonna hold my tongue today. That is evidence of your change. Why? Because you're not on autopilot. You're not a zombie to your life anymore. You're not letting your body run the show. That is your way of taking control, being a steward of your own mind and your own body by not giving in to patterns and habits and conditions of the past. And so that is what I would say to this person who's asking about not feeling anything changing or seeing anything. Is very normal. So if there's nothing else that we'll talk about tonight, there's one thing I want to leave you with, and that is tuning into your heart is not just a spiritual concept. It's a biological, energetic key that opens the door to the future that you've been praying for. And I need you to know that. I need you to take it seriously. I need you to go back and look at some of those videos from chapter 7 as they talk about the importance of this heart, this vessel. When you start living from these elevated emotions of your future, you stop chasing the proof. You stop looking for proof and you start becoming the proof. You start gathering the evidence for every single time you notice you change, every single time you no longer identify with anything that looks familiar in terms of your past. And just like the 4 minute mile, once someone shows you that it's possible, or you prove to yourself what's possible, you can never go back to believing that it's not. So open your heart, stay in coherence, or return to coherence if you choose violence. just get back in the game and trust that what you desire is already reaching for you too. My mom used to always say, what you desire desires you. And it's true. It's just waiting for you to tune into it, to believe that it's possible for you, and just be the one who has it. Be the version of you who already has it. I will see you all next week as we begin chapter 8. And don't forget, you can catch all the previous readings, all my previous lives. My full playlist is linked. I'm going to put it in the description if it's not, but it's on my YouTube channel. It's linked in my TikTok bio. And you can catch up at your own time, in your own time. But until next time, I don't know who needs to hear this, but I'm so glad you joined me tonight. And I hope that I serve as your reminder of what's possible. You got this. Thanks, guys.